I'm Colleen from GE Designs, home of the Stripology Ruler. If you're an avid quilter or new to quilting, you're in the right place because we make quilting G-easy. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Today we're talking about Cuddle. And we love Cuddle in our quilts. We love it as throws, we love it in stuffed animals, and all kinds of application. One question I get asked a lot is, what's the difference between Cuddle and Minky? Well, the difference is actually Cuddle is Minky. It's the branded Minky product, branded by the Shannon Fabrics folks. You know you can depend on this because the Shannon Fabric company produces these products for folks like us who are quilters and sewers. Cuddle, in fact, is polyester, microfiber, and it stretches. It can stretch on 2 sides, or it can stretch on 4 sides. So I'm going to show you an example of the Cuddle hide, just to talk about the stretch for just a second. If I snap this side, it's solid, it's not stretchy. If I pull on this side, you'll see, maybe better to see it from the back, you'll see that it curls a little bit. That's where my stretch is on this particular piece. The stretch tells us how to lay out the fabric and how to pin it so that when we go to sew our pieces together, they're solid. The Cuddle that has 4-side stretch is the one that's called Dimples, and that is a really fun fabric as well. I wouldn't discourage you from using it. Just know that when you have something that is stretchy on all 4 sides, you'll need to do even more clipping and pinning. That's all right. Cuddle is available in lots of colors and textures and naps, meaning the height or depth of that furry side of the Cuddle. Let's take a look at some examples. First up is this fun low nap Cuddle with the white background and the stars. And this is a fun example of the kind of prints that you'll see coming from Shannon Cuddle. Here's another one. Look at these cute little mermaids. Now at GE, we carry a lot of different colors and textures and prints of Cuddle, and they vary from time to time. Right now, we have about 25 unique Cuddle products in our inventory. So these are just examples of things that you will find as you look at our inventory from time to time. Next up is one of the most popular Cuddles. This is called hide texture. So this is always a single color, and then you'll notice that the nap of this has some variation in height. So it really looks like the hide on an animal, and so that's how it got its name. I'll show you how to sew that. It's really fun to use. Another example of a textured Cuddle is this black one. So this has highs and lows in here. Almost looks like this is another sort of a fur looking texture, more uniform than the hide. Another whole collection in the Shannon Fabrics arsenal is the buffalo plaid, and they have buffalo plaids really in every color and all kinds. Let's talk about the tools that will make your Cuddle project outstanding. First of all, you'll need a ruler. Now, I use my Stripology Ruler for all kinds of things, including Cuddle. Sometimes I'm not using the slit. I'm using the outside edges of my ruler. So just to remember, when you're looking at your XL ruler, for example, this dimension here is 22 inches. And sometimes you're needing more and more dimension than that. The other thing I want to point out is the mat. If you look closely at the mat, I've turned the mat over, so we're not looking at the Stripology side, we're looking at the opposite side of the mat. I did that because Cuddle can be very hard on your mat. Other tools are just what you would expect. You're going to need a rotary cutter. You'll need some scissors, and this is the scissor I use all the time. I have a longer shear that I sometimes pull out, but frankly, this is my go-to when I'm working with Cuddle. You'll need some pins. I'll show you my pin cushion. The pins that I like are the Magic Flathead pins, and I like them because they're long. I like the head because the head doesn't get lost in the Cuddle. and they're strong, but they're all and sharp. Another tool that I need is my stiletto by Annie, and that is going to help me feed my Cuddle through my sewing machine. Here's what it looks like in its package. If you don't have a stiletto by Annie, grab one of those. My GE clips, both the large clips and the small clips, are going to be real important too when you're preparing yourself to do your cutting and sewing, because they'll hold your Cuddle in place while you do your sewing. Cuddle is one of those things that really requires pinning and clipping before you sew for you to hold those layers together. Let's talk about measuring. And when you measure your Cuddle, a couple things you want to know is you want to put the markings on the back of your Cuddle, because you can't really mark through the nap in any accurate kind of way. So what I've done here is drawn my cutting line on the wrong side of my Cuddle using a very fine point Sharpie. You can use a pencil, you can use a Sharpie, you can of course use your friction pens or whatever, but frankly, the Sharpie works as well as anything else. It's not going to run, and you're going to cut most of that off anyway. So save your friction pens and your other more expensive marking tools for other things. Measuring is easy for something that's this little. When you've got something that's larger, like 60 by 90 or 90 by 90, let's say, you're still going to want to open up your whole piece just like this. And if you don't have a table big enough, you'll want to put it on the floor and get out your yardstick so you're actually doing those nice measurements on your width and your height. And you want to also be sure that your piece is square, especially when you're using a plaid, because we want, when you cut this and piece this, you want this to look nice. So I have done all of my markings on here, and now I'm just going to do the rest of my markings on here. So I'm going to mark, and I know I planned this ahead, from here to the edge. So here I'm going to, do I need to move over a tad? All right, so here I'm going to just use my Sharpie and run my Sharpie down this side, turn my piece, and it's not, grab my ruler, and I want that to be parallel on the left, and I'll use this raw edge here and run my Sharpie down that side. Now I have two pieces that are ready to cut and put together. So again, the important things to note here are to do your measurement, be sure your piece is square, and then draw your cutting lines on the back of your piece. When you go to cut now, you've got a couple of choices. I can cut this with my rotary cutter. Let me show you that. If I were going to do that, I would just cut as I normally would, and then you can see how much nap, how much of that fuzz is left on my mat. So let me show you that in the hide Cuddle as well, because the more nap you have, the more of a fur that you'll have. So if I cut this Cuddle, this is that furry hide that we talked about, and I'm going to hold really close to the edge here and cut. Now look how much fur I have. And now I've got fur pretty much all over the place, and I'll be sneezing in just a minute. No, I'm kidding. So the deeper the nap, the more fur you're going to get. So how do you avoid that? Well, it's easy actually. You can draw your line on the back of your Cuddle, like I did here, and you can cut through that backing with your scissors or with a sharp-edged blade. And I'm just going to sneak my scissor in there and just cut that backing. And once you get going, it goes quickly, and it even goes a little faster, of course, if you're using that blade. And the blade, you can determine how deep you want to go. Now, when I do that, look at, I have just a little bit of fuzz, but certainly not the amount of fuzz that I had when I did the other method, the rotary cutter method. Also, I'm not losing that nap, so I don't have any seams that look like they're bald. So those are a couple of really good cutting tips. Once I'm done with these, with the cutting stage of my project, I'll take my pieces and throw them into my dryer with a damp washcloth, and I'll put it for about 10 minutes on the air setting in my dryer, and then when it comes out, all of these loose fibers will have transferred to that damp washcloth, and it'll be ready to sew, and it won't release any more hair for me or any more of that fur for me as I'm doing my project. It's time to do some pinning and sewing on our Cuddle. Once your project is cut and you're happy with that, then my next step is always to grab my GE clips, and I'm using the small clips and the pins we talked about earlier, and I'm going to mark, and you might not notice, but if you look closely at your clips, there are little lines here, and those lines are landmarks, measuring landmarks for me. On my Cuddle, I'm going to put the raw edge on the deepest line. Now, obviously, this is already sewn, so this is easy for me to do. But because I cut this and measured it really well, the pinning and clipping was very easy. Now, my second step is to pin this. And now I'm not a huge fan of pinning. If I can get away with not pinning, I will. But for Cuddle, it's really worth the investment of time on the front end, because if you're not, all of these naps are going to rub together and your pieces are going to slide apart. Here are a couple of tips. Start with the sides of your project that are non-stretch. When I do this side and then its opposing side, then when I come back and do the stretchy sides, they just fall into place. That's true of nap for cotton. It's also true for your stretchy fabrics as well. I want the nap on my Cuddle to be going the same direction, so I can feel this, so you can see probably this is going this way, the nap is going this way versus this. Okay, let's look at its the other piece so we can put these together properly. This one again is going that way, although it's not. Let's see. There we go. So now we know that these two sides, and these are the non-stretchy sides, yes and yes. So I would be putting these together like this. So I know which is the nap and I know which is the stretch, and I would be starting on this side and then this opposing side. Okay? So what I will do is just continue to clip and pin, and as with any piece, you want to clip at the beginning and at the end, and you want to do a couple of landmarks so that you know your project. When you finish, you're going to finish end to end. In addition to your clipping, and your nap going in the same direction, you want to use a walking foot on your sewing machine. That's going to hold all the layers together. A straight stitch, which is 3 to 4 millimeters in length. And when I show you a video in just a second, you'll see me fan fold this piece, because as I'm stitching, I don't want this to fall down in my lap and cause a big stretchy mess as I'm sewing. Finally, I always guide these with both hands so I know it's going through my machine really easily. If it doesn't, you might need to lessen the pressure on your presser foot, but certainly your walking foot will work just great. Let's take a look at the video. You can see I'm at my beautiful Baby Lock Forest machine, and the digital dual feed foot is in place. I've used my clips to mark the raw edge and my pins as I showed you here, and now I'm fan folding that so it lays on the table and not in my lap. This is especially helpful when you're doing anything that has a stretch to it. Now I put that under my needle down, press her foot down, and then I backstitch a few stitches and go forward. I take my pins out and my clips out as I go, and I've got about a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, which is about right for this cuddle. And since I did a nice job of measuring and cutting, it's a clean raw edge, and like I said, this is not the stretchy side, this is the side that's more no stretch. So I'll just finish stitching this, and at the end I'll show you both sides. So now we're up to the fun part of the project. We have everything stitched together, and I again have the luxury of using a small piece so that I can show you on the table here. So I took a couple pieces of that cuddle that has that fun nap and cut them the same size and stitched them together. One thing I didn't mention in the stitching is that you should always stitch from your seam allowance to the edge of your cuddle. You can see I did that on both of these. And the reason I do that is when I turn this inside out, then the seam allowance will fold under and it will make closing that so much easier. Before I turn this right side out, I'm going to trim the corners, and here I will use my scissors, and don't trim, you don't need to trim a whole lot away, but I don't like a lot of bulk in the corners, so I'm trimming a little bit away from each of those corners. Not measuring, just trimming and avoiding cutting the seam. Okay, the opening that I left on my project is about 6 inches, and that's enough for me to get my hand in there, and any size cuddle project. I'll bring that out to the front. Isn't this pretty? I wish this were 60 by 90. So I'll push out the corners, and frankly, because this is stretchy, they are going to push out really easily. You don't need to use any special tools, just your finger will do pushing out these corners. Look at how nice that looks. Okay, and then because I did that little stitch, these are automatically turning in, and I'll pin those to remind myself that I need to stitch that closed. And so how fun is that? Now, the Shannon Cuddle folks recommend hand stitching this closed, and frankly, I think that's worth it too. So my next step would be to hand stitch this, and then I often do some top stitching on my project, and now my large clips are going to come in handy, and I can decide how deep I want that stitch to be, but I'll simply kind of roll these seams out and put a clip on there, and now I know that this would be my stitching length, and I of course would add more and more clips so I can go all the way around the project. Rolling this out because I don't want to, I need to be sure that the piece is laying flat. So once I know that it's laying flat, I have the seam rolled open, then I'll just do a top stitch here. And I'll use, I can use different color threads on the top and the bottom, and that thread will just hide in the nap. My final step is to grab my stiletto and look at my seams. Now this one looks really good, but I'm going to ruffle up my seams just a little bit so that I don't have the fluff, if you will. I don't have the fluff hiding in the seam. Here's a better look. I want to fluff this up so that nap isn't hiding in the seam. I'm getting as much fluff as I possibly can from this cuddle. That looks better, actually. From here to here, you can tell you can see the difference. Just fluff that up, those little hairs right there that were caught in that seam. So that's kind of a fun ending project. Thanks for watching this Cuddle tutorial. I hope you found it really helpful. If you have any questions at all, you know you can find us at help@gequiltdesigns.com. We will be happy to answer any questions you have. In the meantime, grab some Cuddle, grab your tools, and make yourself something wonderful. I'm Colleen from GE Designs. Bye for now.